Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Cars with Cuz, and today we're going to be replacing these headlights on this 2008 Lexus IS250 so we can go from this to this. So let's start off with the story behind these OEM headlights. Basically, these headlights started gathering moisture inside, which was probably due to a bad seal or the caps on the back weren't properly put on. I mean, you could literally see the water running down the headlight. So in order to fix the problem, someone decided to drill a hole in the headlight to remove the moisture. Yeah, you heard that right. Somebody drilled a hole in the headlight. That was definitely a great idea.
Stop it. Get some help.
Please don't ever do that to your headlights. So that's why we're replacing them. So without any further ado, let's get to it. First off, I wanted to show you guys the tools you're gonna need to get this job done. You're gonna need a jack and jack stands to support the car. This is done so you can get easier access to the 8 bolts underneath the car. You'll also need a flathead screwdriver to remove some of the clips along the fender liner and the 11 pushpin fasteners on the radiator shroud. And last but not least, the most important tool you're gonna need to get this job done is a ratchet with a 10mm socket and an extension. The reason I say this is the most important tool is because 99% of the bolts you'll be removing are 10mm. Now in case you don't have a jack, you can also use rams, but considering this car sits so low to the ground, the bumper is like about 4 inches off of the ground, I wouldn't recommend using rams because you just end up scratching the bumper. So instead, I'm just going to use a jack and jack stands to lift the car, but neither is really necessary because you can still access the 8 10mm bolts without lifting your car. So let's start off this process by raising the car up and placing the jack stands underneath. Now that you have one of the jack stands underneath, you can slowly lower your car. Next, you want to use a flathead screwdriver to remove the 2 flathead trim fasteners inside the wheel well, turning them counterclockwise 90 degrees and popping them out. As you can see, these 2 gave me a really difficult time trying to remove them, and I think that's because the wheel liner was outside instead of being inside like it's supposed to be, therefore making it really difficult to remove. But as you can see, I eventually got them out and we can move on to removing the 10mm bolt holding the side of the bumper. So now just peel back the fender liner and take your 10mm socket and remove the 10mm bolt holding the side of the bumper onto the fender. As you can see, removing a 10mm bolt with the right tools is that easy. Now just pull back the bumper and unclip it from the fender. With that being said, the driver's side is done. You also have to do this to the passenger side as well. And now that you have removed the 4 flathead trim fasteners from both sides of the car and the 2 bolts holding the bumper to the fender, you can now remove the 8 10mm bolts holding the bumper up to the splash guard. So if you didn't notice, we only ended up removing 4 bolts, and that's because the other 4 were missing. However, we did just get 8 new bolts and just replaced all of them. Next, you want to pop open the hood to gain access to the radiator shroud. And to remove the radiator shroud, you have to pop out these 11 pushpin fasteners. Now that you've popped out all the fasteners, you can now remove the radiator shroud. Now detach the fog light from the bumper and remove the bumper. I would highly recommend that if you're doing this outside on concrete, to have a friend help you remove the bumper, just as an extra precaution to not scratch the bumper. Now take your ratchet with your 10mm socket and unbolt the 3 10mm bolts holding the headlight to the car. Do this for both headlights. So now you're supposed to be seeing me unclipping the wiring harness and removing the headlight, but I couldn't do that for about an hour, and that's because the wiring harness was so badly corroded inside the connection. However, I did end up actually removing the wiring harness, and before I put the new headlight in, I cleaned the connection with some brake cleaner and left it to dry for about 3 hours. So now that you have the wiring harness detached, you can now remove the headlight. Now before you install your new headlights, you have to remove these 3 screws and the brackets from the old headlights and put them on the new ones, screwing them back on with the 3 screws you just took off. Now that you remove the 3 screws, you can go ahead and remove the bracket. Now attach the bracket to the new headlight and screw it on. Now you can connect the wiring harness to the new headlight. Go ahead and install the new headlight. Now that you have the headlight in, you would usually go ahead and bolt it on, but I like to make sure everything works before I do bolt it on. So let's jump in the car, turn on the lights, and make sure everything works. Now that everything works, we can go ahead and bolt the headlight onto the car. Go ahead and install the passenger side headlight as well. Plug in the wiring harness and test the light. Using a ratchet and a 10mm socket, bolt in the 3 10mm screws holding the headlight to the car. Now that we have these new headlights installed, it's time to start putting everything back together, starting with the bumper. Now attach the bumper and snap it in on both sides to the fender. Now bolt back in the top 10mm bolt, securing the bumper so you can move on to the other bolts. Now that the bumper is secured, you can bolt on the 2 10mm bolts to the side of the car that hold the bumper to the fender. Now using a flathead screwdriver, turning it clockwise, put in the 2 pushpin fasteners securing the bumper to the fender liner. Now using your socket wrench, bolt on the 8 10mm bolts to the bottom of the bumper. Now I did forget to film putting back the radiator shroud, but you also have to do that. With that being said, you can now raise your car and remove your jack stands to complete your installation of your brand new headlights on your Lexus IS250. So let's check them out. Well, there you have it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys like the look of these eBay headlights and you want to put them on your car, then I'll leave a link in the description below to the exact same headlights I used. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new to my channel, then consider subscribing. And until next time, I've been Cuz, you've been you, and I'll catch you later.